So the other day we learned how to find the equation of non-proportional graphs. So today, okay, there we go. Alright, so today we're going to go ahead and find the equation of non-proportional tables. So we have the same relationship here. We want to go ahead and use the equation y equals mx plus b. And then we want to use our slope. So we're going to use our slope a little differently here, but we're using the same formula. We're still trying to find the change in y and the change in x. We're just going to do it a different way. Okay, so remember, your b value is your y-intercept, your m is your slope, and these are just your independent and dependent variables. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out our slope. So our slope is going to be our change in y over our change in x. Okay? Now, in order to do this, I could just figure out what is changing here. I'm going from 4 to 6. So what am I doing? I'm adding 2. Okay, so my change in y is going to be 2. I did basically 6 minus 4. Okay, which is how I got 2. Then I'm going to do my change in x. I go from negative 2 to negative 1. Okay, negative 2 plus 1 is going to give me negative 1. So my change here is going to be 1. Alright, so if I take the second one and I minus the first one, this is how I got 1. Negative 1 minus negative 2 is going to give me 1. Okay, so what is my slope? My slope is going to be equal to 2. Now, we want to go ahead and look at a table. Remember, the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, and the line crosses the y-axis at x equals 0. So for this one over here, I could just clearly see my y-intercept is going to be equal to 8. This is where the line is going to be crossing the y-axis. So I have y equals 2x, because 2 is my slope, plus 8. Okay? Now, that was a very easy situation because when x is 0, your y value is always going to be your y-intercept. But sometimes it's not always going to be that way. Let's try another example. Okay, so we have a situation here. Unfortunately, we don't have any x's equaling to 0. So we're going to have to do something a little different. But first, let's find our slope. So our slope is equal to delta y over delta x. So my change in y, I go from 7 to 10, so I'm adding 3, plus 3. I go from 2 to 3, so I'm adding 1, plus 1. My slope is going to be equal to 3. Okay, now, like I said, I don't have 0 here, so I'm going to actually use my algebra to plug in and figure out what that b value is. Okay, so far we have y equals 3x plus b. We don't know what b is, but we do have x's and y values here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in. I'm going to use this point right here in order to plug in. So y is equal to 7. We got 3 times x is equal to 2 plus b. Now all I did was I replaced x with 2, and y with 7. Okay? Now, let me evaluate this. 3 times 2 is 6 plus b. So what number plus 6 is going to give me 7? I'm just going to use my algebra because this is what you're supposed to do. So 7 minus 6 is 1. 1 is equal to b. So my y-intercept is going to be equal to 1. Now let's just put the equation together. Y equals 3x plus 1. That's the equation. So that's what happens. That's how you could figure out what your y-intercept is if you don't have a 0 value for x. Okay, let's try this again. Instead of writing slope, I'm just going to write m, change in y over change in x, is going to be equal to, so my change in y here, I go from 8 to 15. So all I basically have to do is 15 minus 8, which will give me 7. So that's plus 7. So my change is going to be a positive 7. And then from 1 to 2 is plus 1. So this is going to be 1. So my slope is going to be equal to 7. Okay? Now let's plug in. Y equals 7x plus b. Let me use this value. It's easier to always use the smaller numbers. So x is 1, y is 8. y is 8, x is 1. So 8 equals 7 plus b. I'm going to minus 7 and minus 7. So 8 minus 7 is 1. My b value is once again equal to 1. All right? So we have y equals 7x plus 1. And you could always check to see if this is true. Let's just go ahead and check. Let's check with this point. So that means if my x is 3, so I'm going to plug in 3 for x. Whenever I evaluate this, y should be equal to 22. Is it going to be equal to 22? Y equals 21 plus 1. 7 times 3 is 21. Y is equal to 22. So that's how I know that my equation is correct. And that's going to work for any point on that graph. Alright, let's try a few more examples. If at this point you get the hang of it, you're good. You can move on for the video. But if you want to see some more examples, just stick here. Okay? So, good news, I have my y-intercept. When x is equal to 0, my y-intercept will be there. So my y-intercept is going to be equal to 1. Alright, good. Now, let's figure out our slope. Our slope is our change in y over our change in x. So my change in y, I go from 3 to 1. So this one is different. This one is minus 2. So we actually have a negative for the first time. And then this goes from negative 1 to 0. So I'm going to be adding 1. So this is just 1. So my slope is going to be equal to negative 2. Good news, I already have my y-intercept, so I can just plug it in. Y equals negative 2x plus 1. Alright. Now let's double check just to see if this is true. Let's use this point right here. So we got y equals negative 2 times 1 plus 1. Y equals negative 2 plus 1. Y equals negative 1. And yes, my y is supposed to be equal to negative 1. So remember, you could always go ahead and check this if you're unsure. Okay, so I have no 0 for x, so I'm going to have to use algebra in order to figure that out. So that's okay. Let's just do the slope first. So change in y over change in x. My change in y is I go from 22 to 32, so I'm adding 10. My change in x, I'm adding 2 from 2 to 4, so 2. So my slope is going to be equal to 5. Okay? So now we got y equals 5x plus b. Let's plug in. I'm just going to use the smaller numbers so it'll be easier to calculate. 22 is equal to 5 times 2, because my x is 2, my y is 22, plus b. 22 is equal to 10 plus b. What number plus 10 will give me 22? Minus 10 minus 10. So 12 is going to be equal to my b value. So my equation should be y is equal to 5x plus 12. Alright, and once again, let's just plug in a point to see if it's true. So y is equal to 5 times 6 plus 12. Y is equal to 30 plus 12. And then y is equal to 42. And sure is true. Okay? Alright, so that's basically it.